Hi, and welcome to Everything with Emily, where we talk about everything with me, Emily. Today we are talking with the lovely Debbie Lee. Mama Lee is a Gold Star mom, as well as the founder and CEO of America's Mighty Warriors, which is a nonprofit dedicated to our veterans and their families. Hi, how are you doing today, Debbie?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I introduced you as a Gold Star mom. Do you think you could kind of share what that is for those who might not know?
Sure, and I didn't know what a Gold Star mother was till I became one, and it's not something you ever want to be. You're a Gold Star family member because you have a loved one who sacrificed their life in combat for us and for the freedoms that we enjoy each and every day. And Gold Star is usually immediate family, so the parents, the spouse, the children, and the siblings are considered Gold Star. And as I said, a club that you don't want to belong to, but very proud of my son and the sacrifice that he made so that we can live free every day.
Speaking of your son, Marc, could you share a bit more of, his story and how he kind of went into the Navy, maybe?
Yeah, Marc was my youngest. He came into my life at a very dark time in our life. I was 23, had made a very poor choice for a spouse, and he was very abusive and had tried to kill me. So at 23, I had 3 little children and found out 2 weeks after the divorce I was pregnant with Marc. But he, even from the time he was born, he was just one of those kids that was always smiling and giggling and laughing. And then, as he grew, we saw that humor was a big part of who he was. And actually got class clown 2 years, his junior year and senior year in high school. And I was like, great, and this is going to get you to college. How? This is going to get a scholarship. But he could always bring humor in. Very selfless young man. I can remember dropping him off he was a soccer player, and dropping him off at high school, and he'd come over and give me a big kiss and a hug in front of the whole bus. He didn't care, who was watching or what anybody would think about him. And if you were someone that was being picked on, he would come alongside. Lots of times he would diffuse the situation with his humor, but very much would stand up for people and things that he believed in. And obviously his final actions, he stood in the direct line of fire 3 times that day, willingly gave his life. Mm-hmm. But my oldest son, Christopher, went in the Marines in August of 2000. My son-in-law, Christopher, went in the Army in October of 2000. So Marc was the last one. He was good friends with my son-in-law, Christopher. And I think he, liked what he saw in their service and what the military had to offer, but very competitive. So I think he was like, watch this, guys, I'm going to one-up you. I'm going to become a Navy SEAL. So.
He said, I'm the youngest, but I'm going to do it better.
Exactly.
And that's a great quality for him to have and for him to ultimately carry on throughout his life. Did he always want to be a Navy SEAL, or was this something that kind of just spawned one day?
Well, I think when he was in junior high school, he watched a movie about the Navy SEALs. Mm-hmm. And I think every junior high boy who watches anything about the Navy SEALs, they're like, I want to be a Navy SEAL. That's cool. They, in the movies, they always blow things up and they always, get the beautiful women. And so I think every junior hire would watch that movie and say, I want to be a SEAL, but not really follow through. And so Marc had mentioned that he wanted to be a SEAL. He was probably just before he, became a SEAL and went to the recruiting office, had been doing lots of reading about other Navy SEALs and what it took, and I noticed him starting to work out a lot more, always very physically fit. Mm-hmm. So, it went to a whole nother level of intensity of his workouts. And we grew up pretty poor, so he didn't know how to swim, so he would go down to the public pool and start swimming a lot, kind of like, what's going on here? So I could see that something was stirring in him, that was serious now, not just I watched a movie and want to become a SEAL. And so he went into the recruiter's office in May of 2001 and came home and said, Mom, I joined the Navy and I have a contract to go to BUD/S to try to become a SEAL. So,
was this a shock to you at all, or were you kind of like, I see this, I see your determination, I know that you're going to make it, you will be a SEAL?
And he was very much a young man who had a lot of perseverance. And I think that was one of the things. I was not a perfect mom as a single mom. Oh my gosh, I struggled being young, in the circumstances that I was in. But I always taught my kids, don't quit. Yeah. We're going to make it through. Somehow we're going to figure this out, but don't quit. And they would come to me and they'd say, I can't. And I'm like, no, what you're saying is I won't, not that I can't. You're physically able. And so they would hear those things and they would know that we weren't going to quit and give up. And so I think perseverance was very much something that Marc had. He came home his freshman year in high school and said, I want to become a professional soccer player. And I'm like, great, Marc, but you've never played soccer in your life. So, I found the quandary of like, okay, I've taught them you can be whatever you want to be if you put your mind to it, but this doesn't look too good. And I said, okay, let's get you signed up at school. And his freshman year was the most improved soccer player. Obviously, if you've never played soccer and you learn some skills, you can improve quite a bit. And then was the youngest soccer coach they ever had at the high school after he graduated.
Oh, wow.
And was in fact trying out for the Colorado Rapids national soccer team in Colorado, obviously, but blew out his knee the night before tryouts.
Oh gosh.
And so he never got to try out, but they reached out to me about 4 years ago and presented me with his team jersey. They said, we know he would have made the team.
Awesome.
So
That's
I was
really
blessed,
cool.
and it was amazing the event they did. They showed several videos of Marc, and they had fireworks afterwards to honor him, and it was pretty cool to see that. But he's always had that perseverance, so it really didn't surprise me, when he came home and said this is what he wanted to do. I was very proud of, all my family members who, stood up and served and were willing to give their lives for us, and very much supported them in what they were doing in their mission.
Me as well. I come from a military family too, so I've always been very proud and honored that they were willing to do that and willing to sacrifice for us. But so did Marc only go on one tour then?
He did. He was just on one deployment, and he was the new guy in the platoon. And of course, they always make it very difficult for the new guys, and a little, extra, pressure on them, shall we say, to, be with, make it a little more difficult so you don't fit in. And the guys were taking, bets on how long, he would, before they'd embrace him. And they said his personality, his humor, his willingness to do whatever they asked him to do, they've, for not very long, tortured him, made him the new guy. But yeah, very much became part of that platoon very quickly. And he was actually, in the SEAL community, usually they have 2 years of a training cycle once they become a SEAL. And they had to let someone go from that platoon, and so they'd said, give us the best guy that you've got out there and a new guy. And it was Marc that they picked to do that. So he didn't have the opportunity to do all the workups, to do the cold weather training, to do the land warfare with the team and bond with them. He came in just before they deployed.
He was truly just thrown in.
Yeah, very much so. But very much, his headstone says, loved deeply and deeply loved, and he definitely was. And we see that today in his teammates who are still writing books about him. There's been movies made and documentaries made, and they still share the amazing stories. One of the buildings in San Diego and in Coronado on the base is named after Marc.
Oh, really?
The post office in Surprise, Arizona, where I live, is the Marc Lee Memorial Post Office. And I think as a parent, especially when you lose a child, you treasure who they were, and I think sometimes they almost get put up on a pedestal because they're not with us anymore. And I knew Marc was pretty special. I really did, and I would talk about him a lot and share his story. And then I would start to hear his teammates talking about him, and then not just his teammates, but people in the SEAL community, and not just the West Coast SEALs, but the East Coast SEALs. And that's when I realized, oh, he really was special. It wasn't just me that thought he was pretty special.
Not just a mother's bias.
Yes.
That's pretty neat.
100%.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And so where was he deployed? Was it in Iraq, you said?
He was in Iraq, and this was 2006. He was in Ramadi,
2006.
Iraq. And his teammates said that was the worst piece of real estate over there, the hellhole of Iraq. And as a Gold Star mother, I'm the first Gold Star mom in history to be in the combat zone where their child was killed. And I got to visit the base that was named Camp Marc Lee in his memory after he passed.
That's extremely touching. How was it being there? Was it hard?
It was amazing. It was amazing. And I think for what we do at the foundation, it definitely gave me a glimpse into what our veterans and those who serve go through. I got to smell what it smelled like over there. So when we work with them, I can relate to them.
Yeah.
And I do know that when I was flying in, they hadn't briefed me, about too much other than I was going to Iraq.
Yeah.
And as we were landing and getting ready to get off the plane, they do a corkscrew landing, and my background's aerospace science. And I know when your plane's doing this, it's not good.
No.
It's usually how they crash. And but they do that so the enemy can't figure out your landing pattern and try to shoot the planes down.
Wow.
And so as I'm spinning around and I get a little motion sickness, I'm like, oh, please don't get sick now. This is going to be so humiliating in front of all these warriors. And I didn't get sick. I was a little nauseous, but didn't get sick. But when we got off the plane, there were explosions happening. I'm like, okay, this is what I signed up for. I knew I was going into the combat zone. But later found out that the IEDs and RPGs that they had found that hadn't exploded, they would take them on the edge of the base and intentionally, blow them up. So they were controlled detonations. But I didn't know that. And I'm like, okay, here we are. But we did have one night where a missile went over the base and exploded, and I felt the blast wave from that. But it was an amazing opportunity to see where Mark spent his last days, to see where he worked out, to see where he slept, walked that area where he had walked. And it was definitely a blessing and a memory of a lifetime to be able to do that.
100%. Could you walk us through kind of Mark's last few days or last day?
Yeah, so his last day, and we're here in Arizona, so sometimes we see 115, 120.
Oh, yeah.
Last summer we saw a lot of those days.
Oh, yeah.
But they'd been in an intense firefight for 2 hours, and they'd been on the rooftop. There were 4 SEALs that were up there, 115, 120 degree temperatures. He carried the big gun, the 50 cal, so he carried anywhere from 150 to 180 pounds.
Wow.
In addition to his own weight and those extreme temperatures for that long, I can't even imagine how they do it. But his buddy Ryan had been severely wounded. The bullets had actually hit his weapon, and so he had severe shrapnel injuries to the head, and he fell to the ground. 2 of the SEALs dropped to their knees to help him. Mark could have made that very same choice, but his choice that day was to stand up in the line of fire right where Ryan had just been shot, knowing that the sniper that shot Ryan probably had eyes on Mark.
Yeah.
But they didn't have a medic up there, and they could tell it was severe, so they knew they had to give the medic, cover so he could get up to the rooftop, and he did. He got up there and took one look at Ryan and said, we got to get him out of here immediately. There's no chance for survival. So not just once, but then a second time again by himself, he made the choice to stand up in the line of fire. He didn't weigh the pros and cons. He just knew it was the right thing to do. And I'm proud to say that he did. He provided that cover. So they all got down off the rooftop. They sent Ryan off for medical attention. And they headed back to that base, which I had mentioned that I visited, named Camp Marc Lee. And we've watched our Navy SEALs do some absolutely amazing things. And at times they seem superhuman to us, but this is my adopted family. Those are my boys now. I know them well. And as they got back to the base, they started to rip off their gear and get some water to refresh themselves. And the chief came in and he said, we just found 30 of the insurgents that just attacked us. And without hesitation, Mark looked at his chief and he said, Roger that, let's go get them. So they climbed into their Bradley and they headed back to that godforsaken place. They cleared several houses. And they went in the last house Mark would be in. They cleared the bottom of the house and they started up the steps and they heard him yell, on me. And for those who served, you know what he was saying? He was saying, I got the lead on this. You guys follow me. We got a bigger mission. I need your help. And as they went up those stairs, they drew fire through a window. And for the last and final time, Mark made that choice again to turn into the line of fire. He could have ducked below the wall. He probably would have lost half his platoon. But he made the choice to stand up and save his teammates' lives. And there isn't anything more noble or honorable than someone would do that. John 15:13 says, greater love is no one than this, than to lay down their life for their friends. And that's what Mark did. And it wasn't just his friends, it was for you and I and for the freedoms that we enjoy each and every day in America. And so many people take that for granted. And I'm so proud of Mark. His name, the meaning of Mark, means mighty warrior. And he definitely lived up to his name.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Just hearing you speak about Mark's story is super touching, and your words are very eloquent in the way you talk about his death. I know it's very hard, and even though it's been how many years now?
It'll be 18 years, August 2nd.
So. 18 in August.
And not once, I have told this story over and over, and not once has it ever been where I'm, containing myself so I don't break down and cry. Because I think of him and I think of, at 28, most people at 28 don't have their head out of their rear yet, let alone be able to, in that circumstance with gunfire and explosions and the heat and the weight of the firearm he was carrying, to be able to think clearly enough to say, this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
This is my purpose. This is my mission.
And to make that decision in a split second and not hesitate, because had he hesitated, it probably would have been the same of him just laying down like the other ones. So for him not to hesitate is also a huge testament to his character and how he grew up in that same determination and willpower that you had previously talked about that he exhibited. You can just see it throughout, the end of his life. Even in his last action, he's still doing that to protect, the ones that he loves, which I think is really admirable. And so you mentioned that Marc's name means Mighty Warriors, and your foundation, America's Mighty Warriors, I have a feeling that's why you named it.
It is, and it's not just Mighty Warrior. I didn't leave it just at Marc's name. It's America's Mighty Warriors, because it is about every man and woman who served. It's about every family member who had a loved one who gave their life. It's all of our warriors in America, and that's who we support as our active duty, our veterans, our Gold Star families. And it's our honor to be able to do that for those who were willing to give their lives for us, or the families of those who did.
And, coming from a military family, my aunt also served. She was deployed in 2011 on a naval destroyer ship around the Horn of Africa. When she came home in 2012, sadly, she couldn't deal with the PTSD and everything that so many of our veterans come home and struggle with and don't know how to deal with, and she ultimately ended up taking her life. And it's been 12 years, but it's still super hard to talk about and hard to even put into words, like that type of grief and anger you feel as a family member. And so I really commend you for turning this grief and anger into something positive and something that impacts other veterans, other families, and other people who are, now in the same situation that you once were, say, 18 years ago. So thank you for that.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Suicide's always a unique one because it leaves so many unanswered questions or what ifs or why didn't I. My husband actually committed suicide almost 30 years ago. June 1st would be 30 years. So that's something that we've lived through. But I find that the trials and difficulties that you go through in life that give you an understanding. I can relate to you, your family. If it was just losing Marc, I wouldn't understand the suicide side of it, and that's a unique one to deal with. And for me, I remember after the funeral just feeling so all alone. I'm a widow. I don't have anybody at home. But now everybody's gone back to their life. I didn't live in San Diego where all Marc's teammates were and where the base was. And I'm not a person to have a pity party and feel sorry for myself. That wouldn't bring Marc back. It physically would make me sick. Nobody's think I want to be around me. And that's not how God wired me. So my choice, not with my feelings, but with my will, was to say, I can make a difference for someone else. Little did we know it would be about 7 weeks after Marc died that we lost Mike Monsoor, who ended up receiving the Medal of Honor for his heroic actions that day. But I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I needed to be there for that family. I wasn't going to let anybody else go through this alone. And again, he's buried at Fort Rosecrans where Marc is, the same hotel that we stayed at, the same black vehicles came and picked them up, and I was just reliving that wound that had closed a little bit after 7 weeks. It just was ripped open again. But I knew it was the right thing to do. And just to be able to be there and encourage those families and support them is, I get to see Marc still saving his teammates' lives. Through our Helping Heroes Heal program, those that are struggling with post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and many of them suicidal. We're providing hyperbaric oxygen therapy, hormone and supplement therapy. So natural things that are actually healing them, not just masking the symptoms. So much of what's out there, they're going to the VA and they're given, prescription drugs. We had one of our veterans who went through our program was on 53 prescription drugs that he took twice a day.
Wow.
Now, to me, that should be medical malpractice, because what happens is the side effect from this one, you're giving them this medication to offset that side effect, and then they can't sleep, so you got to give them sleeping pills, and then they can't wake up, so you got to give them stuff. And it's this madness, you know, and I get why our veterans want to try to self-medicate with alcohol or drugs or whatever to get rid of the pain. I get that. But when there are things that we can do that can heal them so they don't have to deal with that, that's what we focused on. And I can't tell you how many veterans have said, I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for you and your foundation and the therapies you provided. And so, as I said, I get to see Marc still saving his teammates' lives.
That's pretty cool.
He's not physically here, but he's still saving their lives. And so that's pretty powerful. And without the pain of losing Marc, I wouldn't have the purpose and passion that I do to be able to do what I do.
And to be sharing a story every day and helping impact those who hopefully hear it. When you first started your foundation, what did you expect to come of it, if anything? Did you just think, oh, I'm going to help a few families here and there? Or did you see it, you know, being such an impact as it is now?
No, I had no clue. I mean, I didn't wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to start a foundation.
Yeah.
I just would happen to be in Washington, D.C. when one of our SEALs came in with his face blown off by an RPG. And God has gifted me the ability to go in and visit with them and not be shocked and not start crying and not be, oh, you poor thing, I'm so sorry. Because that's not what they need. These are warriors. And they need someone that's going to say, hey, you know, we had another SEAL who lost both his legs. And I remember going in the room going, oh, dude, come on. Quit feeling sorry for yourself. As soon as you get those prosthetics, we're going to run on the beach in Coronado and I'm going to beat your butt, you know. And they need that challenge. They need someone. And that's how, you know, God wired me to be able to do that. And like I said, I just happened to be in D.C. when, you know, the one came in who lost his legs. And I was in his room before he was even brought down from surgery. And so the coincidence of things, I started to go, I think I have a new purpose or passion. Marc's last letter home talks about doing more random acts of kindness, how we could change our world. So I started doing those things. He said, when's the last time you paid for a stranger's cup of coffee or meal or tank of gas? So I started doing those things just to honor Marc. You know, I accepted the challenge in his letter. I could do that. And then when I saw that there was a, you know, bigger mission here and started the foundation, I really just, you know, visioned that we would be supporting some other Gold Star families. That's where we started, that and the random acts of kindness. And then as we were in that community and saw the need with the PTS and TBI and what a big problem that is, then we started that program. But we just continue to grow at an amazing rate and help so many more people. And especially this last year when so many nonprofits, you know, have had to close their doors because of the funding. And we continue to be blessed to be able to be out there and help and support and make a difference for our amazing warriors and their families.
Could you go a bit more into the different programs that America's Mighty Warriors provides?
Sure. So for our Gold Star families, we have a house here in Arizona and one in Florida. The one here is the Heroes Hope Home, and the other one's Serenity Hope Home. It's a place where they can come stay free for the week. We take care of their airfare, their rental car, and just, you know, time for them to get away and let them know we haven't forgotten them and we won't ever forget their hero. And we just love on them and pamper them and let them know that. We do retreats in East Texas for our Gold Star families, also for our Helping Heroes Heal program families. Beautiful 1,000-acre ranch, and it's got zip line and kayaking, canoeing, and paddle boarding. One time I accidentally said waterboarding. I'm like, yeah, no, we won't waterboard you.
No, not
but
that.
Send the terrorists to me. I got no problem waterboarding them. But we do, before the Army Navy game each year, we do a big dinner for the Gold Star families, and again, just honoring them and thanking them and letting them know we won't ever forget. Our Random Acts of Kindness program, in response to Marc's last letter home that we talked about a little bit before, where he said, when's the last time you paid for a stranger's cup of coffee or a meal or tank of gas? So we do those things, but we've expanded that up to a $5,000 grant per veteran. The veteran themselves can't come ask, because we have found veterans just going from charity to charity to see what they can take, and that's not who we want to help. But if you knew somebody, you could reach out and say, hey, I've known this person for 10 years. You know, their child has cancer, they can't work right now because they need to be in the hospital, or, you know, lots of times we help with funeral expenses that aren't covered if they're out of the military already. We just did $50,000 to the Hawaii when they had the fires in Lahaina.
Oh, wow, yeah.
To help the veterans there. And that's pretty cool. Again,
Yeah.
For Marc's challenge, we're, following through with what he asked us to do and be able to change lives. We do a lot of advocacy and education, so trying to raise awareness as to what our military families, the sacrifice they make, what our Gold Star families, who they are, what they do, and the importance of supporting those who are active duty and those who, are veterans. And then our Helping Heroes Heal program I mentioned earlier, that's our biggest program, and that is for our veterans who from combat have post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and we're paying for the hyperbaric oxygen therapy, hormone and supplement therapy, natural things that are healing them. And we've done SPECT scans of their brains before and after, and so we've seen that amazing healing that takes place. Part of the advocacy that we're doing is for 5 years we've been trying to get legislation changed that's an approved therapy from the VA and DOD that they would pay for that. But man, that's an uphill fight. And I've often said, I didn't have any choice the news that was given to me on August 2nd, 2006. But I did have a choice how I responded. My choice was to put on Marc's boots, pick up his weapon, and stay in the fight. Yeah. And figuratively speaking, I'm not firing bullets at anybody, but it's a fight to make sure that they're taken care of. It's a fight to make sure our veterans who are struggling have, can be encouraged to have that courage to say, I need help. 100%. That's not a sign of weakness,
No, it's not.
And I tell them often, if you were in the battlefield and you'd had your leg blown off, you'd be crying, medic, medic, and yet those that have those invisible wounds that we don't see, don't want to admit it, don't want to ask for help. And so, I often say that's a sign of courage and strength to be able to step up and ask for help there. And there probably isn't anything I wouldn't do for our veterans, but that's our 4 main programs and what we do through America's Mighty Warriors.
That's amazing. Those programs all sound awesome. Do you have an example of maybe, or a story of one of these veterans that has come through and done one of your programs and maybe how it's changed or helped their life in any way?
Yeah, one of the ones that sticks out in my brain so much was one of our Navy SEALs. And we do all branches of the military. Yeah. Obviously, I'm very connected to the SEAL community. Yeah. That's my family. But we always follow up to find out, what symptoms are better. And typically they struggle with, they can't sleep. Your frontal lobe of your brain is what controls, where a lot of that blast wave exposure happens. That's what controls your sleep, your emotions. So whether it's the raging emotions or no emotions, and then your memory. And so those are some major issues to deal with in life for anyone that's going through those things. I have one night of sleep with 3 hours, and you and I wouldn't be having this conversation because I'd be like,
100%.
What did I just say? What were you talking? And it's hard. And I'm not a person that gets road rage or agitated easy at all, but I have 3 hours sleep and I'm on the phone with American Airlines trying to figure out my flights that they messed up. I tend to get a little gruff and I'm like, who is that person? That's not me normally. And it's like, oh, you didn't sleep. So I understand why the veterans, struggle with those things. But as I called and talked to him and I just said, so how's the sleep? And he's like, man, I'm getting 7, 8 hours sleep. I've never slept this good, and going through all the things. And he got done and he said, well, you saved my life. And I said, well, hey, you were willing to give your life for me. That's the least we can do. Yeah. And he said, no, stop. And I was like, ruh-roh, made a Navy SEAL mad. That's probably not going to end well. And he said, I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for you and your foundation and the therapies you've given me. You literally saved my life. And when he said it that strong and that loud, he got my attention. And when he said it that way, I thought back to Marc, and I think that was the first time that I really felt like, oh my goodness, I get to see Marc still saving his teammates' lives. And to see them continue on, to see marriages that are healed and restored once they, have healing. And again, not that there's still emotional things they deal with, but they're in a much better place then to deal with those things where they don't seem so major. And it's pretty cool to be able to be a small part of seeing the changes in our men and women who serve.
That's beautiful. That sounds amazing and lovely to be a part of. So you've mentioned a couple times Marc's last letter home. Could you kind of describe what was in it, how you got it, and how it's kind of impacting what you do now?
Yeah, very, very powerful letter. And it wasn't that if you're reading this, I'm gone letter. He didn't write one of those. But it just happened to be the last written, word that we got from him. And it came via email. And it probably went to about 12 or 13, close friends and family members. And I remember reading it, and I homeschooled my kids. So, and Mark was not stupid by any means, but I'd never seen written language, anything he was really good at. And that letter literally has changed millions and millions of lives around the world. And I read it on email and I scrolled to the top again. I'm like, wait, who sent this? And obviously I knew it was him because he talks about combat and things he's seen, but I'm just like, wow, you just feel the change in him from what he saw over there, what he'd endured. He talks about the country, and the obligation, how lucky we are to live in America. He sees that contrast now that he's been, to a terrible place like Iraq. And he says, we live in a great country. We have an obligation to keep it that way, That's when he talked about those random acts of kindness, saying, when's the last time you paid for a stranger's cup of coffee, meal, or tank of gas, or helped someone with their groceries into or out of the car? He said the things like that could change our reputation as a country. And he talks about some of the things that he saw over there, but he ends that with, to my family and friends, do me a favor. Pass on the kindness, the love, the precious gift of human life. And after he passed and I read that again, I was almost like, oh my goodness, did he somehow know, what was ahead for him? But what a gift that letter is. You and I had talked earlier about loss, and we learn ways to cope, we learn ways to manage the grief, but you don't ever get over it.
No.
But one of the things I do on those difficult days is I go do random acts of kindness. I go to Luke Air Force Base, or if I'm out of town, I find a military base, or go in a Starbucks and look for veterans hats and buy them meals, buy them coffee and tank of gas, and just say thank you. I never take for granted who paid the price for my freedom. And so, that's one of those, thank you, Mark, for leaving that letter and giving that away. Because, when you take your eyes off of yourself and focus on someone else, it just changes your outlook on everything. So
I think that's honestly amazing that, Mark may not have known what lied ahead from him, but he was able to express what he wanted from his friends and from his family, and how he wanted you guys to go out there and spread, his love, his joy, his kindness. And I can definitely see that in your organization and everything you've done. It definitely just screams like full circle almost, that this is, what you were put to do, and Mark's sacrifice will never go unnoticed or untouched by the amount of people who have heard his story and how touching it is to so many people. So thank you so much for sharing that, first of all, because I know it can be extremely difficult to kind of put into words how grief may or may not affect someone and different people. So how do you think those watching can support their veterans, or just maybe just support Mark's message of kindness?
Yeah, and I think we could change our world by just that last line, pass on the kindness. Do we always have to agree on everything? No, Mark gave his life for you, whether you're independent, Republican, no matter what color your skin is, no matter what your faith is. But if we all treated each other, even though we may have different thoughts on things, with that love and kindness, our world would be a different place. And I think that's so important to be able to do that for what we do. As to your question of how do we support the veterans, if you've got neighbors, go, just visit with them sometimes. If you've got families who are deployed, go offer to mow their lawn, or, take them out to dinner, babysit for them, do something for them. Or if you don't, we always need financial support to be able to be the hands and feet, to be able to do that. So people can always support us at americasmightywarriors.org. But I think, educating your sphere of influence around you is so important as to our men and women who've served, the sacrifices they do make. There's so many great documentaries out there about those who've served, and several about Mark, personally they can find out, or all the books on our website document Mark's amazing story, or written by his teammates, or I'm a contributing author in 3 of them. But I think just starting with waking up and realizing who pays the price for the freedoms we enjoy every day will then stir you to go do something, and not just have it be a thought. But we could all change our world in our sphere of influence if we all just woke up each day and did a little something. You don't have to start a foundation or do something huge, but everybody can do their part.
Just a small act of kindness.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I love that. All right, yeah, I think that's awesome, and I love everything you've been doing with your foundation. Unfortunately, our time is coming to an end, but I just wanted to thank you again for being here and being willing to share Marc's story. It was truly inspirational.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it very much, and I hope people who listen to it will be inspired, encouraged, and I think no matter what we're faced with in life, whether it's hardship, whether it's financial hardship, whether it's physical hardship, whether it's loss, grief, there's several things that we could all be struggling with, and I'm sure everyone that's watching this will have issues that they've struggled with. But I would just encourage them that not just with your feelings, because you won't ever get to a place with your feelings where you want to be grateful for something when you're dealing with loss or change or hardship. But with your will, you can choose to be an overcomer in the midst of whatever circumstance that you are going through. But thank you so much for doing this. It's been a joy. I've really enjoyed it.